will be eating them. What now will protect Cordelia gumma? The infection that causes mad cow disease is so resilient that it's safest to incinerate it at extremely high temperatures. It cannot be destroyed by cooking. It is vital, therefore, that none of the BSE bug is left in our food. What you are seeing now is the final and ultimate safeguard to protect us from BSE. Brains, spinal cord, and most of the guts of every single cow slaughtered for human consumption are sprayed with an indelible dye and destroyed. These are the organs that the government says could contain the infective agent that causes mad cow disease. Not all experts agree. Liver is not banned. This is how you might handle the liver of a BSE cow in your kitchen prior to eating it. This is how an expert committee advises you to handle BSE liver if you work in a laboratory. You are advised to protect yourself from any possible contamination.
If I was actually doing an experiment, right, what I would, in a laboratory, is the tissue would be placed in a microbiological safety cabinet. I would have a laboratory coat on, I would have rubber gloves on, I may well have an eye shield.
Can you explain why it is appropriate to use those precautions in the laboratory but not elsewhere when cutting and sometimes eating that material?
The difference is that I know I am dealing with material which is infected.
We have no way of knowing whether a piece of liver comes from an infected cow, but we do know that up to 600 infected animals a week may be prepared in our kitchens and eaten. The BSE bug has only ever been found in the brain, spinal cord and part of the gut, never in meat or liver. But leading scientists are not convinced that this is as reassuring as it sounds. They point out that the test we now use is not very sensitive.
If the test on muscle shows negative, we can't conclude that there's none there. In fact, there still could be quite a bit of BSE in that tissue, depending on how sensitive the test is.
It could be there at a very low level, but that is known by the experts who carry out these risk assessments, and that is a matter for them, for the Department of Health and the Advisory Committee.
The final protection for Cordelia is the removal of the banned offals. Those parts of the cow that might harbour BSE must be removed from the carcass. This is the spinal cord. Government inspectors have recently found the cord in carcasses bound for the shops. And on Friday, abattoir owners were called to a meeting at the ministry and told to clean up their act. It came as no surprise to some who work in meat hygiene.
You have to split the backbone, open up the spinal column and make sure that that is all removed. It's very difficult to do that without damaging the spinal column and without it getting distributed onto the rest of the meat.
Marja Hovey is a qualified and experienced vet, specialising in public health and meat hygiene. She was appalled at the low standards of enforcement she saw in British abattoirs.
The problem is at a modern abattoir where the man who is removing the spinal cord doesn't have time to actually make sure that everything has come out, since the line is moving very fast and he has a limited time.
Are you confident, in the light of what you have seen in the operation of abattoirs, that the intentionally highly infectious tissue is being removed in the way that it ought to be?
No, I'm not confident about that.
It is likely that Cordelia's beef burger may be made from a dairy cow. Young beef steers are made into tender steaks. It's the dairy cows at the end of their milking life that go into processed foods like cheap burgers, sausages and pies. The average dairy cow is 6 when it goes for slaughter, and dairy herds are more likely to be affected by the mad cow epidemic. This means that processed foods are possibly more of a risk than joints and steaks.
I think that at the end of the milking life of a cow, it should not be eaten, it should be destroyed. If, for instance, we took a herd of 100 dairy cows, it will probably be somewhere between 8 and 10 cows would actually be infected with BSE. And we may well find that all the cows in that herd are infected. At the moment, we don't have the data to be sure.
Stephen Deeder is not the only one with doubts about our dairy herd.
In older cows, those that have spent their lives in the milking parlour, we're still seeing a significant number of cases in these, and therefore one could argue that the dairy cows pose presently the biggest risk for transmission to humans. And one possibility would be that we would stop eating dairy cows.
Our control programme applies to all ages of cattle, and that all these cattle going in for slaughter have a veterinary ante-mortem inspection, and the tissues that could contain infectivity are removed at the time of slaughter.
When we buy a steak, a burger, a pie or a packet of mince, we cannot know if it's from a sick animal or not, whether it's gone undetected by the market inspectors, slip detection at the abattoir, or if all the infectivity is removed. It's a lottery. We do know that thousands of infected animals are still reaching our food.
If you knew that the meat you were eating came from a BSE-infected animal, would you eat it?
If I knew for certain that the meat was from a BSE-infected animal, no, I probably would not eat it as a precaution. We don't know whether this agent will transmit to humans formally. We think not, but we don't know for certain. And therefore, if I was certain that this particular piece of meat came from an infected animal, I would choose not to eat it.
The consumer is fully protected. That is our view. It's the view of the independent scientists on our advisory committee. It's also the view, most importantly, of the Department of Health and their Chief Medical Officer. Thank you.
Tuesdays are a red letter day because for some